Tell me when to read, Sam. Good evening. For tonight's CitySpeak forum, we look at what's happened in our schools this last year and what the community may anticipate at area schools next year. On hand to field questions, Corvallis Public School Superintendent Ryan Noss, Teachers Union President Christa Schmeder, School Board Vice Chair Shauna Tominey, and Corvallis Public School Foundation Executive Director Angela Hibbard. I'm Steve Schultz, representing both organizations that present these forums, City Club of Corvallis and the Corvallis Advocate. City Club of Corvallis is a volunteer-run, nonprofit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. The Advocate offers fresh Corvallis news daily online, these town hall meetings, and extensive events calendars. Partial funding for these forums comes from Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op. However, we could not present CitySpeak without support from viewers like you. One way you can support these town halls is a subscription to the Corvallis Advocate. If you go to our site, you'll see there's levels at $10 and $15 monthly. If you would like to pose a question for our panel, you can email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com or post your question to our live stream on our social media pages. Before we get started with the newsier issues of the moment, we'll start tonight with a quick overview of the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation. Angela Hibbard is the executive director for the foundation. And Angela, could you give us a sense of what the foundation is, what it does, and how it's supported?
Sure. Thank you, Steve.
Mhm.
The Corvallis Public Schools Foundation has existed for more than 25 years. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we are independent of the school district, although we work very closely with the school district. And we really exist to raise support for our local public schools and to invest in our students. Essentially, we are the bridge between our generous community and our schools. So we really, our funding is focused on kind of three priority areas. So funding for targeted programs that help support improving graduation rates in our district, providing support for programs that help improve educational access. So that might look like assistance for students who are navigating homelessness, mental health challenges, and other struggles, as well as providing funding for enriching educational opportunities in the classroom and beyond. So that's kind of the focus of the work of the foundation. Last year, we raised over $750,000 in support of Corvallis schools. And we are here to continue that work to support our public schools.
Angela, could you give us one or two examples of the kinds of projects that you've supported through the foundation?
Sure. So every year we have an Imagine grant cycle, which is open to all staff in the district, an opportunity for them to apply for funding for an idea they have, equipment, a new program, something that maybe just is not really permitted within the constraints of the school district budget. One of those examples that comes to mind, recently we funded both tools and consumable needs for the College Hill construction program. And so that has supported their construction program and allowed them to grow that and even expand to where now they are gaining real world skills, job skills, and creating micro shelter that will be donated to the Unity Shelter. So really extending that reach into the community. So that's an example of an Imagine grant that came to the foundation that we funded. We also recently introduced a student-driven grant campaign where students can come and share their ideas for improving their community, their school community. And we just actually closed that cycle recently for this year. and will be one of the grants that we're funding is at the middle school. And students came forward asking for support to help kind of reinvigorate their student center and create kind of a nurturing, calming space, and needed funds to do that for sort of furnishings and materials and such. So those are two examples of grants. And we're also this year supporting what we have for the last 10 years, funding for summer programs. So academic credit recovery and other programs to keep students on track to graduate. That's a critical partnership that we've had with the district now for quite a while, and has been, I believe, instrumental in helping contribute to the increase in our graduation rates in the district.
And then before we kind of move on to questions for our other panelists, how do folks go about getting a hold of you, the foundation? What kind of things do you need?
So anyone can reach out to us through cpsffoundation.org. Our website shares information about all of our funding opportunities. My contact information is there. I'm happy to talk to community members about how they can support, how they can get involved in fundraising we're doing right now to support summer programs. We're in the middle of fundraising to increase our funding for summer programs this year. So I would encourage anybody to check out our website, reach out to me directly.
Thank you so much. Really great work over there over the years. I've been impressed with the foundation. Okay, great. Thank you, Angela. Moving on, I'm going to start with Christa Schmeder. She is the Teachers Union president for the district. It's been a fraught year, Christa, for area schools. Disciplinary issues and incidents of violence have risen this year. A group of teachers walked off the job in response at one point. Christa, you're engaged with teachers and students every day. I mean, you're not just the union president, you are in fact also a teacher. So if you could unwrap for our viewers so that they can just really understand in a real lived experience way, what are, I guess, first the students going through, and then how is that manifesting? And then what are the teachers going through and how is that manifesting? Maybe with a couple of examples would be helpful. Christa.
Thanks. So I guess the first piece I would just want to mention is that this isn't new to this year. There was a part of your question that alluded to it at just starting this, not starting, but kind of happening this year. And I think, as I've been preparing to talk to everyone today about our goals moving forward and making sure our kids are safe and have access to all the things they need, and that our teachers and staff are safe and have access to the things they need, I've been going through the past presidents' logs about things that have been coming up in membership. And what I've noticed is pretty much since fall of 2016, like something changed in public communication, including communication that happens at schools. I think for lack of a better term, the grown-ups started publicly treating each other poorly. There was very little civility amongst leaders speaking with each other publicly in a national forum, and that trickled down into the local level, and it got really hostile. And kind of like when you're at home and your kids make your face at you, like your angry face or your sad face, or they repeat words you wish you didn't yell at football games. I think a lot of times the kids see what's going on with the grownups in community, and then they start to replicate it. And so I think really this kind of started in 2016 nationally. And because of the little bubble that we live in Corvallis, our kids weren't experiencing as much of that. And then slowly in the years building up over COVID, we started seeing an increase in aggression, an increase in anxiety, an increase in escalations because of stress and not knowing if the world was going to be okay. And then COVID happened and everybody went home into their own little bubbles, and we did the best we could with making sure we were reaching out to families and educating kids to the best of our ability. And when we came back, all of us were exhausted, and it wasn't like COVID was just over. And so when people are stressed, it's hard to stay regulated. And we're talking about kids, you know, and so kids are going to have an even harder time. And so we've seen the ability for kids to regulate and listen to adult instruction when they're stressed out, whether they're stressed about a test or stressed about a friend or stressed about stuff at home, following basic instructions like, can you please come into the classroom? You know, can you stop running in the hallway? You know, please don't throw stuff off your desk. You know, like those become challenging requests when they're not met over and over again with kids not coming to class on time, leaving class when they want, younger kids acting out with aggression when they're frustrated, you know, whether that's flipping tables or chairs or ripping artwork off of walls and ripping up their classmates' artwork, you know, throwing objects in rage, like not intentionally like trying to hurt someone, but when you're the staff member and something's getting thrown at you and it happens, you know, it gets scary and they're kids you care about. So we want to take care of the kid first, but we also have the other 30 kids in the room who need to feel safe to be able to access. And when they're being asked to leave the classroom over and over again, so that you can take care of the kiddo who's escalated, you know, that starts to impact the other kids, not only the time they get learning, but just how safe they feel. So I think, you know, when our staff members walked out back in February, it was a cry for help for our kids. It was a cry for help for our staff. It was a cry for help from parents of like we've been really, really trying to hold it together and we can't, and we need someone to listen. And I think we'll talk about this later, but we've been working really closely with the district since then and trying to align everyone's vision for what a safe learning environment looks for all kids, not just kids who are escalated, but staff and the other kids in the room and community members when they're in our building. So we've been working really hard to come up with a better plan for the fall. So we can start fresh and, you know, finish strong this year. Obviously, we've been putting some things in place this year to make it safer, but really leaning into our community to help us out next fall.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm going to go ahead and move over to Ryan. My understanding is that other districts throughout the country are going through much the same thing. Are there examples of districts throughout the country that have done an especially impactful job in terms of easing things for teachers and students? What has our district been doing this last school year, and what are you considering for next school year starting in September? And you know what, Ryan, actually, I'm going to go ahead and I want to say this in a different way. I mean, this is from a viewer, and they stated this pretty succinctly. What plans are being put into place to assure a safe physical environment? And they point out specifically middle schools for 23-24. So kind of, I want to roll that viewer question into the advocate board question.
Sure, I'm happy to answer both. I think that Christa did a really nice job of setting the frame for kind of what we've seen and the challenges that we're facing. So I don't know that I need to go back and rehash that necessarily, because I agree with what she's sharing. And we have some incredible staff in our schools and in our district working really hard, supporting our kids and caring about the successes of them deeply and working really hard. And so one of the things that we've been working at together is looking at how do we continue to support kids who, if you think about our sixth graders right now, they were third graders in March of 2020. And you think about the skills that students learn between third grade and early adolescence, there's a lot of things that kids practice and learn how to do that are hard to do when you're isolated and you're only with your family and you're not with your peers and you don't have that kind of feedback. So one of the things we're thinking about and talking about are what are those skills that we need to continue to help kids to muster, because we know that there's work that needs to happen there, because we're thinking about all aspects of behavior. So we're thinking about instruction and teaching. We're thinking about expectations that are consistent and clearly communicated to students. and to families. And when incidents happen, that as administrators become involved, that there's communication happening back in support of that teacher, so they know what those next steps look like. So they also feel like there's information, and I understand where we're headed from here. So there's work we need to do around expectations. There's work we need to do around communication. And there's work we need to continue to do around educating our students. A couple things that will look different next fall are things that we're currently working on. As an example, we're working on clearly outlining expectations that are shared and taught amongst our staff and amongst our students and shared with parents. At the middle school level in particular, we're looking at the services that we're providing to our students and looking at students who need more intensive supports. How do we put those into place for students in ways that they can learn those skills and practice those skills and become more successful with them? In CSD, one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is that we do have we're the largest child mental health provider in the county, because we've hired our own therapists and skills trainers to help kids to learn skills, support those lagging skills, and help kids to be able to generalize them. So we have a lot that we're working on, but I'd say like specifically clearer communications and clearer expectations around what skills we're teaching and also what our expectations are, and making sure that there's a broader continuum of services to support our middle school kids, again, recognizing that they have some skill development because they were away from us for a while. And that is part of what we do in public education. So often people think about public education as strictly academics, but we are providing services to kids in all facets of life and supporting families as well. And we have work to do. I also often think that folks have decided that we are past pandemic and we are past pandemic recovery, and that is not the case for schools. We still have work to do in supporting our students, our faculty, everyone who works in schools to be able to continue to move past the pandemic, but we are not done with that work.
So, I kind of drilling into the answer that you've given a little bit. What are you specifically doing in middle schools that you weren't doing before this school year, or what is planned for next year specifically that will be new?
Yeah, so I think that I wouldn't consider this new, but I would consider it improved or enhanced, and that is.
And what are those improvements and enhancements specifically?
And that's where I was headed. So thinking about what are having clear expectations that are evenly applied across the school. We need to make sure that we have time at the beginning of the school year to get staff, teachers, and administrator alignment there. In terms of the education piece, we're looking at some character development curriculum for our students with the most intensive behavioral needs and lagging skills. We're also looking at bringing on additional staff to support students with those lagging skills, because we again know that we need to provide education, and we also need to provide behavioral support, and so that's going to look different next year too.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I add on to that, Stephen? Can I add on to some of the new things also?
Sure, yeah.
So some of the new things that our members have been really excited about has to do with a clear pathway to access the tools we already have. Because one of the things that was happening was that there were many tools being developed by people throughout the district, but it was like everybody was reinventing the wheel on their own in their own classroom or in their own building. And we had never had a moment to pause and breathe and come together kind of like as co-parents and say like, what are we all trying? What's really working? Let's consolidate it and give each other access. And so the district has agreed to create a single space for staff to access all these resources instead of relying on us to comb through emails and Google Drives and internet searches and talking to a friend. Like, it's all going to be in one place. in one document with a widget on our class link so everybody can get to it. And I know that seems like a simple thing, but we've been so busy in the business of serving kids every day that we literally haven't had a moment for the grownups to get together and be like, what do we got? Oh my gosh, you have that? I have one too. Yours is better. I'd rather use that. So that's one new thing that I'm excited about, and it links into communication. And then the other piece is really targeted meetings with parents at the beginning of the year to make sure that we're on the same page and that they understand the process so that they know what the path is for all kids. And because we believe our parents can handle this, that they understand the nuance of education, that like if we have a path for most kids, there are going to be some trauma-informed practices and some, you know, things for students on IEPs or who are in SPED that are going to look different from like the general student. But we believe the parents are excited to like know what those are, understand the pathways so that they feel like kids are being treated fairly, and we can serve more kids better.
Now, Ryan, in specific terms, one of the questions we've heard a lot, and some of these questions, I'm doing the best I can to consolidate them because they'll be, you know, the same question asked a few different ways from different viewers. One of the questions we're getting a lot of is, okay, the example being, student is violent towards another student, the school district intercedes in one way or another, but that student ultimately winds up back on campus and potentially creating this, from this one viewer, apparently the same issues. What is going on there, and is there a way to have that student removed from campus if there's constant issues? I do know there's federal law that's involved here, right?
Yeah, that's a question that has some specific pieces to it, that makes it hard to answer in general terms, because of the ways that we are responsible for supporting all students that come to schools in the Corvallis School District. So we have responsibilities to educate all of our kids, and we work hard to find ways of doing that. That sometimes includes a behavior support plan for a student. We look at at student schedules. And we look at passing time. We look at a lot of different factors in trying to figure out how to make sure that that student can continue to access education. And at the same time, we're working to make sure that everyone, all of our other students feel safe in learning, and our staff feel supported. So I'm not trying to be vague in that, but there's a lot of nuance to it that goes into play as we think about the individual needs of our students and how do we provide the supports so that they're able to access their education.
Yeah, well, I guess what's really not being asked succinctly, so I'll put it in these stark terms, is there a point where the district says, at this point, this student really needs to not be on campus for the rest of this school year based on biting, hitting, throwing things? Is there a point at which the district does this?
There are times when that happens through a disciplinary process, and at the same time, we're still responsible for making sure that that student has access to an education. And so we look at ways to do that. Yes, we look at that, and there are those possibilities. At the same time, they're still our kids, and we're still responsible for educating.
Shauna, I'm going to move over to you. There's been quite a lot of conversation without you in it here. And yet, not only are you the vice chair at the school board, you're also an associate professor in human development and family sciences at OSU. You have a black belt in this stuff. For what students and teachers, no pressure there, for what students and teachers have been experiencing and what the district's doing, what would your hope for next steps be from your vantage point? Shauna.
It's a great question, and I'll do my best not to repeat too much of what Christa and Ryan already shared. There's been a wealth of information already shared, but also to reaffirm some of it. And what Christa was talking about in terms of the tone changing around 2016, there's data that shows that student, child, and youth mental and emotional well-being and health was declining before the pandemic. And having the pandemic come in the middle of that context, we saw an even greater decline. And some of the data in Oregon, for example, shows that just general mental and emotional health, as well as suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts, were rising in terms of poor mental and behavioral health, as well as rising in depression, as well as some of those other outcomes. And the pandemic then led to that becoming even worse. And as Ryan was saying, we don't often think about social and emotional skills as those skills that are being taught and that have to be practiced and have to be practiced in the context that they're in. And so having students who are already struggling with these skills in so many ways and in that learning process then be taken out of these in-person learning settings, we have students who are missing 1, 2, or 3 years of practice in social settings at a time when they were also experiencing heightened stress, some more than others, some also experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, food insecurity, as well as social isolation. Even if they found it online, that doesn't make up for these same situations where they're having to practice even simple things like Christa was saying, like waiting in line or waiting for a turn or asking for something when they need it. These are skills that many students need practice and are missing practice in. And that's also resulted in these heightened behavioral and emotional needs. And so just like what we'll talk about later with math curriculum, for instance, this is a year, and these years, both leading up to now and what we see on the horizon, we have students who have probably the greatest need for differentiated support that we've seen behaviorally, emotionally, and academically. And one of the things that we hear from families who are concerned, and rightly so, about behavioral challenges, about acts of violence, is this worry for, we need something now. We need tomorrow my student to come to school and feel safe. I need to not be in the situation where I'm worried, or where staff members are worried, or where students are worried that something could happen at any moment. And the reality that Ryan was getting at too, in terms of how we support students, is that teaching these skills takes time. And so to really support a student effectively is going to take staffing time, resources, an approach toward restorative justice, a trauma-informed approach, not just sometimes we do get asked about what's the punishment, what's the immediate shift, or how do we get the student out of our schools tomorrow, versus okay, what's the long-term plan so that a student isn't necessarily punished in the moment and then stops because they're afraid of the consequence, but really has the skills to make other choices, has the skills to be able to know what the impact of their actions is on themselves, on their peers, on other educators. So we're actually growing a community of students and adults who have those skills. And that takes time. And we are in that situation of having both the immediate need for safety and the ability of all students to learn and thrive, with the tremendous support needs that some students have more than others for the time it's going to take to really build those skills well. And so to speak, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I thought you were wrapping up there.
That's okay.
Perhaps I got that wrong. Go on if you'd had something else.
Sure. I was just going to jump in with the follow-up of your question earlier when you were asking about what I see as what's needed, or even our role in the school board. I think a piece of what we do on the school board is really look at what are the policies in place that allow district leaders and educators and staff to do their jobs really well. And Christa spoke to the need for, we've had questions and concerns from staff that they want and need consistent approaches. They don't always know what to do in these situations, and they need our trust in them to know that they do have skills and resources and tools, and they need to know that they'll be backed up in that and have even more tools at their fingertips, knowing that they have the support behind them. So I'm really excited about this consistent approach and resources approach that will be coming to staff, as well as some of the additional behavioral supports and approaches that schools are going to be taking. And I think in our role as school board, it's really up to us to then hold district leadership accountable to these policies, in also looking at, is what's written down on paper, is the hope and what's being tried actually then playing out that way in practice for educators and staff and students.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to a viewer question that may be connected to this. And the concern is specifically to do with smartphones and social media. And that clearly this lack of civility that you, Shauna, and Ryan Pryor had mentioned, and I think Christa as well. I can certainly say in my field over at City Club and also at the Advocate, we certainly know that there's been shifts. Um, what is the district's policy in what are you trying to do in helping educate really students, and I guess secondarily parents, in terms of social media usage, smartphone usage, um, and the like. I think that just recently, America's Surgeon General has declared social media hazardous to the health of adolescents and children. Um, I, Ryan, I think you and I may have discussed this years ago. I'm going to go to you first. In just about 60 seconds, big social problem, 60 seconds.
All right, we'll solve it. So what I'd say is that we are having conversations right now in the midst of our conversations around middle school about access to cell phones during the school day and access to and limitations on that. One of the things I shared in a update to middle school parents after the winter break was about not texting their kids during school because we all have practices that we need to shore up and tighten up. And so we're having those conversations as we think about the fall.
Okay, great. And does anybody here have anything to add to that, or shall we move over to school budgets now?
I phones, I echoing what Ryan said. I've answered kids' phones before when I can see it's their parents calling or texting, and I've been like, "Hey, it's me. Could you not, when they're in class, or ask them to step outside?" Because, and then the parents are usually like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just needed to tell them where their ride was." Like, it's never been malicious. And then the other part I would say is, the only board policy that, and then Shauna, that I just want you to know that teachers are going to ask if we can change a little bit is, right now kids are allowed to have access to their phones at lunch. And we really believe for mental health, for safety. I mean, phones are how people are texting each other to meet them out for a fight. Phones are how people are sharing where the location of the vape pen is and which bathroom, because they can text a picture of it. It's how they're videotaping kids on an IEP doing things that they think are funny that they can share on social media. Like, it is not good. We just want phones to be away all day. And if kids need to have them in the bottom of their backpack, so if an emergency happens, their parents feel better, totally fine with that. But I would really like to see the board consider phones away all day. They're just away.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Christa. And I'd love to see the conversation continued in a way that engages both educator voice from staff perspective of what's happening on a daily basis so that we can make sure policy is shaped that really reflects the reality, as well as student voice. All of our policies are made better when students are involved, and we know all of those things that you named are this huge risk, as well as all of these risks with social media, and that students became cell phones became a security for students too, in the way that they see them as a portal to their social world in so many ways. And so making sure we engage those voices while we also tackle these very real challenges.
To the viewer that asked this question, really great question. Thank you so much. And I think you've perhaps created a conversation between staff, board, and teachers. So thank you for that. Ryan, I am going to ask you a kind of follow-up question that was not in the viewer's email. Is this in the health curriculum somewhere about the role of social media, and that frankly one may be better off just ignoring social media, frankly? But my personal editorialization aside, is there anything in health curriculum about this? Christa, you're shaking your head yes. So, okay. Ryan, yeah, no?
I think that there's lots of conversation that happens about it in our middle schools and high schools. I think it could probably be more explicit. as we continue to learn more and more about the challenges that come with it.
Yeah.
Well, and I have a middle schooler who's a sixth grader, and I am super privileged and blessed that she knows my students at CHS, and she'll ask me for something related to social media. And the same kids who are addicted to it will tell her, like, don't do it, Addie. It's so bad for you. As soon as I got it, like, that's when my mental health went bad. And this is the reason why you shouldn't have this till later. And the kids know. It's just like any addiction. It's hard. Like, when you shouldn't, eat something or drink something, or if you're addicted to cigarettes, like, people know and they're trying. And I think the kids are trying too. And I know our health teachers do talk a lot about it in middle school and high school.
And I will personally editorialize coming from a family of shrinks. I can tell you just the way social media sets up, it is predictably bad for you. So just that bit of awareness, and now I'll shut up and just be a good moderator. Ryan, let's move to school budgets, okay? The Oregon School Boards Association has maintained the state school fund would need $10.3 billion to avoid cuts at local schools throughout the state. For the moment, it appears worst case scenarios have been avoided. But the number out of Salem still does appear to be about 10.2 billion, not 3 billion. And Corvallis schools, on top of that, are anticipating some declining enrollment. I think that's maybe already going on. I could be mistaken. What can the community anticipate for the district's next budget? And for the budgets beyond that, could kind of speak to the kind of 4 or 5 year horizon as you're trying to look ahead. Ryan.
Yeah, so we, at this point in time, today, the Ways and Means Subcommittee, Education Subcommittee, voted forward the 10.2. So we feel good about that. That is great movement, and from my estimation, in helping us to get a strong education budget. That's one component of what happens in schools. And I think that's one of the pieces that I'm wanting people to think about, is that we get a certain dollar amount from the state. At the same time, there's other factors that impact and influence our budget throughout the year. So now that we know it's likely that we'll end up at 10.2, at some point we will, the Senate will come back and they will take action, and those dollars will be moved on to schools. We also look at things like our enrollment. So in the fall, after 10 days of school, students who've come back are included in our enrollment. Students that don't return are not. New students coming in are populated by that point in time. So our enrollment year over year is something we look at in the fall. Midwinter, we look at our local option levy, which we're so blessed to have in this community, because it allows us to have things like music, PE, the arts, extracurriculars, so many things that our community has provided us is phenomenal. And so we look at those dollars midwinter. So all those things are yet to happen. One of the things that we know is a factor, and then the other thing that's a factor is that we've received federal dollars as we've come out of the pandemic, and we have till the end of next year, June 30th, to spend those dollars out, which we know is an additional $2.3 million that has come to our school district as we've continued to work to address COVID and recovery. So those are the factors that we're looking at right now. So the two that are likely to change, one is those federal dollars will come to an end. And so if we're thinking about over the next 5 years, that's one change in the dollars that we've been able to account for over the last couple. The other factor is enrollment. We know that in our schools, the kids coming in based on birth rates in our county, as an example, we expect to have about 350 kids come in each of the next 5 years. At the same time, our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade classes have over 500 students. And so we know that over the next several years, we will have fewer students attending schools in the Corvallis School District. There's lots of discussion about that. one of the key drivers in my mind has to do with affordable housing and the ability for young families to be able to come to Corvallis and afford to buy a home, and have young kids coming into the school district. I think that that's a significant challenge for us. We have conversations that we know that the number of kids that went into homeschool during the pandemic, those numbers are back to what they were pre-pandemic. So that's not as great of an impact. But what we do know is that it's expensive to buy a house in Corvallis. It's more expensive for families that haven't had years to build up wealth in other homes. And so as you think about young families, that is one of the biggest challenges that we have as a school district, and it will impact our budget for the next 4 years. And what that causes is us to have to think about the programs and services we have, and how do we continue to provide those essential services, and at the same time recognizing as you have fewer students in your school district, there's less revenue coming in, and how do you work to address that?
And then I'm going to move to really just follow up, because I think really Ryan probably got most of this. But Christa, first you, and then Shauna, then you. Any follow up to Ryan's comment on school budget?
I would just, like to throw out, I'm sure Shauna will talk about this also. We have had a district that's been very smart financially since Measure 8 passed, like forever times ago, not forever times ago, but a while ago. And the times are different now. When we developed our board policy about our reserves, we have a giant reserve that I'm sure is great to have when you're talking to other boards about their reserves, that yours is so much bigger. However, when that was established and the policies for that, we didn't have the Corvallis Public School Foundation. If people then had the Corvallis Public School Foundation, things might have been different. We didn't have really the QEM, the quality education model, in the same way that we have now as people are making their budgets. We didn't have the student investment account, and that has totally changed the game for some of our things in terms of stabilizing education funding. We didn't have the local options levy. If any of those things had been around when they created their reserve policies, it might have looked different, similar to how you have a big savings account until you're able to invest and have retirement accounts. And then maybe you're not as worried about keeping as much in your savings account because you have access to money in other places. And so I'm really hoping that the board considers looking at their policies and adapting them for current practices and current students with the current resources.
I'll move over to Shauna.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Christa. That actually came up as a conversation in our last budget committee meeting as well, where we went through and just talked through what's typical for a district our size, why does that matter, and some of the benefits, for instance, of having a reserve right now where there's a hold going on in the legislative session, or there has been, and worries about when funds would arrive, and having reserves that the district can use while also recognizing that there are things that have changed, like you mentioned. And so it has come up as a point for future board meeting conversation that was brought up by board members in terms of revisiting that policy. So that's something that I think hopefully will be continued in conversation. I think that also this is, one, we should give a shout out for community members, for educators and staff, for students, and for others who really spoke up and advocated to legislators around the need for enhanced or additional school funding based on what we thought was coming through and what's coming through now. There were so many champions in our community as well as around the state who really spoke up in support of that tremendous need. And the amount that was approved, that 10.2, is being called a historic amount, or the greatest amount that's come out yet in general funds. And I think we also have to recognize that because our district had access to COVID relief funds, the ESSER funds, for the last 2 years, and really invested in heightened staffing support because that need was there for students. Those funds have dropped while general funds have increased, but not enough to make up for that amount. And we know that those needs still exist for our students. And we were hearing that all through public comment over the last 6 months plus from educators coming to school board meetings saying we don't have enough as it is with these heightened funds. And so to hear that now what's being offered in the budget, which we're very, very grateful for and look forward to supporting the district and using wisely, it's less than what was there before when educators were already telling us it wasn't enough. And
So
so
I'm
I
gonna
still hold those concerns, and it does bring up that question that Chris is bringing up of, as we find additional need, where do we go?
Now, so the audience is aware of it. Christa Schmeder, Teachers Union President, has had an unanticipated need to leave this session at 7 p.m. So we're going to gear some questions towards her specifically, kind of in a row, and then circle back to Superintendent Noss and School Board Vice Chair Shauna Tominey. Christa, this viewer asked that I'm not even sure how I want to phrase this. This viewer sees much of the remote learning that was undertaken during the pandemic as being driven by the teachers union, at least as to the longevity of that decision. It's not being months, but more like a couple of years or 3 years, whatever it was. And really sees it as the union drove that decision. And they want to know what was your responsibility as a union in that decision, and what will be your responsibility in terms of making up for the learning loss. Christa?
Thanks for clarifying. At first, I thought when you were asking that they were saying that they thought that the teachers did a bunch of the heavy lifting to make it possible. And I was like, yeah, we did. And then I was like, oh, no, that's not what they meant. They meant that they thought it wasn't good enough and it was our fault. So at first I was excited about the question. And now I thank you for clarifying near the end. So most of my memories of going through COVID were it was all about advocating for students and what they needed. The state would send out their directives and ODE would send out their directives, and then our district leaders would get together and talk about those directives, and then we would figure out how to put those things into place. I think the first part of the pandemic, all of my memories around what the union was involved in was getting people food and toilet paper and what they needed. I mean, I had a student who confided that they were cutting up shirts to use as toilet paper because their family had run out. And so I went around and got some extra toilet paper from my staff friends and drove it to their house. I had another student say that their grandma had run out of food and didn't know if they were allowed to ask for some for their grandma. So like most of my memories had to do with staff working really hard to get kids into a place where they were eating and sleeping where it was warm and having to, I mean, seriously, that was most of the union's work at the beginning. As we came out of that initial shock, it really became training each other on how to use the technology so we'd have the best access to our kids. For me as a ceramics teacher, it was making 180 ceramics kits and finding funds through the foundation to get enough materials to actually do that. And, you know, sending home, I think my advanced kids got pottery wheels so that I could teach them how to throw. And that was one of their big mental health things. I mean, really, it's hard for me to hear that they think that the learning in the pandemic, any of it had to do with our choice. We were taking a lot of federal and state level guidelines and trying to figure out how to make it safe. We had community members telling us it was too soon to come back, and some saying it wasn't soon enough. I was able to come back early and teach some of our students from our life skills program who needed some in-person instruction, some limited in-person instruction. And it was a hard thing for my family since I have a 65, a 75, and a 90-year-old at my house, and knowing that I was going to be coming in with a lot of unknowns and unvaccinated because it wasn't available yet. You know, it was a hard time. And so I guess I would just tell that viewer, having been through a global pandemic once, if we have to do it again while I'm a teacher, things will probably be easier and run smoother because I'll know which questions to ask. And we did the best we could, and that's all we're capable of doing. And in terms of the future, to Shauna and Ryan's point, the COVID, it's not over in terms of the impact of on learning. It's not over, whether your kid has a social emotional need or an academic need or an interpersonal need. It's not over. And so one example is like summer school. Last year, we were able to have a lot of staff service a ton of kids to get them caught up during summer school. And that's because the state gave us $1.5 million to do that. And this year they're saying, oh, COVID's over, no money. So now the district has to find $1.5 million or downsize our summer school program. And both of those are hard. And we know they're still in need. And we talk about recovery of learning every day, at every meeting, at every PLC. And so I would just hope that that viewer has, you know, a little bit of empathy and trust for how hard the last 5 years would be, and that they know, I mean, I want my kids to get back on track too, like my children, not just my school kids, but my own children to get back on track too.
And Christa, I guess specific to the viewer's question, was it really primarily the union that drove remote learning continuing into that second year?
Man, Ryan, I don't even know how to, I don't think so. I mean, I wish I had the power to do that. I mean,
Ryan, what was the main driver
that-
there in terms of
I know
decision
that
making?
there were some safety things where we were negotiating like for people that needed safety equipment and stuff, but I don't ever remember it being like us or them. I don't know, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, if we can get about 30 seconds from you on it.
Yeah, the primary driver was the rules put in place by our governor around an emergency, and those emergency provisions, everything from the vaccination to the students being away from school. We had little control over those things, and we responded with every unexpected turn that came. And our staff, our teachers, they changed the way they taught 3 times in 18 months. So I don't think anybody signed up for that.
Okay, Christa, I'm going to dial back to you because you're the one that needs to leave at 7. And then for the viewers out there, I want you to know I am seeing all of your questions about TAG, about math classes, and about students that are on IEPs. We will be getting to those after 7. Absolutely, going to be getting to those. Okay, Christa, new to schools. This viewer says new to schools here in Oregon. Seems like teachers don't really have the ability to discipline students directly. Is that the case?
I would say that teachers do not have the ability to make up their own disciplinary system, like at large. Like the way you handle day-to-day discipline in your classroom, that's a personal thing, and you work with your supervisor to make sure that it's not impacted by bias. And but in terms of larger disciplinary things, we really try, at least in our district, to make, what we're trying to do is make sure that each kid, no matter what school they go to, can expect approximately the same process. So if kids have to move or parents have to move, that they don't have to relearn a system for when discipline happens. So day-to-day stuff, we have freedom to handle that professionally and work with our supervisors. But I would say for bigger things, we really try to make sure that we're coming up with.
And I'll give you some specifics from the viewer. Viewer mentions the idea that detention, suspension. Are you able to send a kiddo to detention as a teacher?
We would have the ability to send a student to the behavioral staff for them to figure out what step of the process they're on. Because, for example, if a student is asked to leave a classroom for a certain offense that wouldn't be grounds for suspension, but they've done it in 3 other classrooms that maybe that teacher doesn't know about, the behavior team might decide that they should have in-school suspension because it's happened in multiple classes. But I wouldn't make that decision because I've only seen it once in my class. So that's why we try to have a team of people that are keeping track of where kids are
And
at.
and then you're, as I recall, you're a middle school teacher, right?
High school.
High school, sorry. So now, where you've got a teacher that's with them all day, such as in an elementary school, Ryan, um, is a teacher able to do something in terms of having a kiddo in detention or suspension if there's been enough of a problem?
Elementary school is a little different, and I don't think they have as much personal ability to make those decisions. I'll let Ryan answer that one.
Yeah,
Ryan, about 30 seconds on that one, if you would.
typically the principal would be involved in those decisions as they work with the teacher.
Okay, I'm going to move back to Christa. Again, you're going to be leaving earlier. So at school board meeting, I think it was last month, there was some discussion in terms of social study curriculums, and that teachers were being approached with complaints that ranged from, well, we'd like to see more curriculum on more different kinds of marginalized people groups and such, and more social studies. And then on the other end, seeing what is being taught as problematic or political. What are you hearing from teachers, Krista? And you being a high school teacher, actually, this is fortuitous because I think probably this is where you're starting to hear it from. That's my guess. Could be wrong. Anyways, Krista, can you unwrap that a little bit? What are the teachers going through about this, and what are they hoping for from the district?
I think in an ideal world, what we would be looking for is enough time to look together at options before we get down to the nitty gritty. And I think because of the tremendous increase in workload for teachers, all and other para educators too, like all of us, we really don't have built-in time in our week to do curriculum adoptions in the way teachers want. And so what I'm hearing is feeling rushed, feeling like maybe they don't have access to all of the options they would like, feeling like when their voices are called upon, maybe they're not having as big of an impact as they would like because of time constraints and financial constraints. And then also questions about like who's being asked, like who gets asked to be on the teams. Do we have enough? I mean, we don't have enough diversity in our teaching staff to begin with. So then when you're pulling from a pool of less diverse than the community, educators, then maybe there's not going to be enough diversity on the groups choosing that. So I think what I'm hearing from teachers is they want more communication, more time, the things we don't have currently.
Now, when a teacher is approached by a parent that believes something's problematic or overly political, how does that get fielded by a teacher? How are teachers feeling about that approach from parents?
I think right now the system that at least works at my school is that if a parent has concerns, and if it's about the curriculum and it's district approved curriculum that's being used, then they're asking their supervisors, their principals to come and help with that conversation to take some of the, not only the weight off the teacher, but also I think it's helpful for the parent to talk to someone who isn't their student's teacher, because they wouldn't want to make that relationship weird or more weird. And so
Are teachers satisfied that supervisory staff are in fact coming up to the plate for that?
I think it depends on their supervisor.
Okay, thank you. Just before you go, in about 30, 60 seconds, because you do need to leave.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so sorry. I wish I could say I love this stuff. So I'm sorry about the conflict.
Yeah, and then I guess, just parting shot, for this last year, what have you seen as challenges met, or challenges that were not met as well as you'd like on the other end of that, accomplishments in the last year at our city schools? And then also, what are you hoping for next year?
Sweet. Wow. 30 seconds. All right. I
60 if you want it, but I
no,
know
it's
you
okay.
gotta go.
It's okay. I think one of the things I'm the most, I guess I'll start with the sad one, the most disappointed in is that it had to get to staff walking out, and it had to get to a rally at the courthouse, and it had to get to us coming up with a coordinated way to show solidarity at school board meetings. Like, we're already exhausted, and we've been doing so much heavy lifting for so many months and years now, that I'm sad that I couldn't find a way to articulate that didn't require awkward communication and those things. But I'm happy that we have had, and the past president, Peg, she developed such a positive relationship with the district, even through hard times, that when those things happened, it was kind of like a wake up call from a family member. Like, how are we going to deal with this? It wasn't abrasive or combative. It was like, oh, wow, I see you. I hear you. What are we doing? So I am proud of that we still have that legacy that I'm trying. Sorry, I'm getting emotional, but it's just been so hard. And then what am I looking forward to next year? I would love to tell our staff that the district is going to give us a big raise for all of our hard work and for inflation, so that we can keep living here and bringing our kids to school. Because currently, even if you theoretically had a 20% down payment, let's pretend magically for a house in Corvallis, you had 20% down. Don't know what teacher's going to do that, but let's pretend the only people who can afford a loan for a house in Corvallis, like an average house, are on the top step of our pay scale. So you have to teach her for 18 years before you can bring your kids to school here. And for most young educators who live in Albany, who live in Kaiser, who live in Salem, who live in Eugene, I'm thinking of people I know with young kids whose kids don't get to go here, and because they want their kids to go to their neighborhood school because they believe in public education. Just want them to be able to move here and be my neighbor. And I mean, I live in an intergenerational house. That's the only reason I can afford to do it. I live with my mom, my husband's mom, and my grandma. It takes 5 adults to live in Corvallis. My poor husband. Oh my goodness. So anyway, I would love to be able to tell them that we have great insurance and a big raise waiting for us in the fall.
Christa Schmeder, thank you for showing up this evening and juggling us into what is clearly a very busy schedule. And good evening to you, Christa.
Yeah, and thank you guys. We'll see you soon. I'll watch the rest when I get home.
And then I'm going to move on to Ryan. Ryan, I want you to respond a bit to what Christa had said in terms of what her hopes are in staff pay, and what teachers are going through in terms of wanting to have a home here. For instance, teachers are very often going to show up for open houses. They need to show up for sporting events, extracurriculars that are after school hours, which is pretty hard to do if you're living in, Lebanon or Kaiser, and you got small kids at home yourself. What kind of hope can you, or not, can you offer in terms of pay for teachers at our schools?
So we're in the middle of collective bargaining right now. So I have to recognize that and be somewhat vague and vague in that. And at the same time, recognize that Corvallis is a special place to be. I think about the cost of housing here, and I think about my own kids who are graduating and freshmen in college, and thinking about if they want to come back and live in this community and contribute, what are the limitations for them as well. And so I think that I recognize the need to compensate our staff. And I also know that there's other factors that make it difficult to be members of the Corvallis community. One of the things that we've done has been to allow staff to bring their students to their into the school district to their school, to try to create that sense of community. And at the same time, I know that there's more that needs to be done.
Shauna, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll just say that in addition to, collective bargaining is going on, as Ryan shared, and we'll be getting an update on that soon on the board. But just thinking about how we really think about educator well-being and support for educators in terms of we're in the process of reviewing and revising the board goals for the upcoming next 3 to 5 years. And that's been something that's come up in conversation over and over is, in addition to student academic achievement, student well-being, support, family and school partnership, but really thinking about the well-being and support of our educators and staff as something that really needs to be highlighted and embedded as really a meaningful part of this, not just toward the aim of student achievement, but also for the well-being of the workforce. So that's something that's an ongoing conversation too, and looking at how else do we do this. And just a quick shout out I wish I could have said this when Christa was here, but I know her time was limited, but just gratitude to her for being here. She is an educator. She is a parent. She is a union leader. She is coming to school board meetings. She is attending events throughout the community. She is giving of her own time continually and with tremendous generosity. And she's one of so many who are doing that in our district. And that's something that we need to recognize is something we often expect of educators and staff who work in this field, and something that we need to find ways to really honor and support in meaningful ways.
Angela, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I wanted to comment going back a little bit to the budget conversation, and several people have mentioned that COVID recovery is not over, even if COVID relief funds might be over. And I think this is really an opportunity for our community. And one of the things that we can do as a foundation, we can be a lot more nimble than the school district budget can be. And we demonstrated that on a dime when schools closed in March of 2020. And in a short period of time, the community responded. We raised, I think, over $160,000 to help support students in need, make sure people had Wi-Fi, hotspots, anything that students and families needed to try to patch together, what was needed to extend learning during that time. And I think that the community needs to continue to think that way as we look at the budget constraints that the district is facing and these still really real needs that prevail from COVID. And so I guess I would like to just maybe challenge the community to continue that sense of urgency and support that we're so fortunate to have, because our community has shown over and over and over again how generous they are and how committed they are to our students. So that was just the comment I wanted to make when we were having the budget conversation earlier.
And then I think we need to move from budget to, we've had several viewers ask about both TAG and the math programs. Enough that it's hard to know where to start. So I want to go ahead and kick this off with let me just start here. This is actually from a former school board member. I've heard that the curriculum, particularly for math, has been adjusted to allow all students equivalent lessons. This was apparently done so all students are learning the same content. Unfortunately, because not all students are the same, the ones with greater math aptitudes are not being challenged. As a highly educated community, Corvallis has many students who benefit from a challenging curriculum. Teachers and parents feel that in the name of equity and diversity, the curriculum is being dumbed down. So that's from a former school board member. On another end of it, for example, all sixth graders are now, this from another viewer now, not all sixth graders are in the same math class. There's no accelerated, now that all are in the same math class, excuse me. There's no accelerated math, nor a remedial class. As a result, it seems to me, TAG kids are bored silly with projects such as determine what color your math is, while the kids who are behind have no dedicated resources to catch up. And again, I'm still quoting this viewer, so not my words. Yet in 8th grade, the TAG kids apparently will be placed in an accelerated class where they will suddenly have to learn how to deal with hard math, which is intended to catch them up to a level where they'll be able to take AP Calculus in their senior high school year. Calculus being necessary for kids going into engineering programs, this being an engineering town on some level. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. If you can address the myriad questions in terms of math and the way it's being treated at the district, and apparently quite a bit through the middle schools. Ryan.
All right, so there's a lot packed into that question or questions, and so I'll do my best to answer them. So one of the things that we have been working to do is to make sure that students have the skills that they need moving from grade level standards to grade level standards throughout our system. Again, that maintaining that kids can end up in calculus. One of the things that we know from our experiences has been that kids have leapfrogged in the past and missed out on important concepts and standards as we have accelerated kids through our system. As a result, there have been times where kids have had skill deficits related to specific standards that they didn't learn or weren't taught, and also kids at the far end not taking math through their fourth year of high school, which we also know is difficult when kids are heading on to community college or university. And so we're trying to look at what are practices that allow kids to gain the skills they need along the way. And we've recently made a math adoption that will be implemented this upcoming year at our middle schools, looking at what sorts of curriculums allow our students who are gaining skills sort of at an introductory level, and students who are working at a mastery level to be working alongside one another, not just in algorithms, but in communication with one another with a deeper understanding of mathematics. We also know that by the time our students in 8th grade, we're having conversations with them about where they see themselves as mathematicians and how we make sure that they are moving through algebra as 8th graders along with 8th grade standards and continuing on that path. The other thing that we're looking at across Oregon is around data science and making sure that we are beginning to embed more and more data science in our math curriculum, because we know that those are skills. We just talked about social media not too long ago. How do we make sure that kids can understand data and understand questions related to data, able to analyze what they learn from data? And so looking at how do we incorporate that also as we think about our kids transitioning through those courses in high school. So there are changes happening in mathematics. And at the same time, one of the things I learned late fall, early winter, having conversations with teachers at the middle school level was really about making sure that there was curriculum that we were working on adopting and that met that need. So those processes are underway. We're continuing to make progress. And at the end of the day, we continue to offer kids high-level courses as they're leaving our system and going on to greater opportunity.
Ryan, I'll move on to a question about TAG, which I've gotten sometimes from the same viewers. There's been a lot of questions on this. This particular one I'll quote: can you include questions on the complete absence of TAG programs in the LP middle school? I have one that's almost a mirror of that for Sheldon, but I have several on the question generally.
So TAG plans are individualized, and they are a teacher or a counselor meeting with a parent and a student to talk about how we're working towards rate and level of learning, and how are we making sure that we're thinking about those pieces around acceleration. So for that person who asked that question, I would encourage them to reach out to their school to sit down together to talk about that child's TAG plan, so that the staff and the parents are on the same page.
So who should they reach out to at the school?
They could probably reach out to the front office and get directed to whoever is helpful or working on that piece with their family.
Okay.
Front office would be the easiest.
Okay, so probably that's best whatever school they're at. And then I will say to viewers out there, if you have follow-up questions about this, I will be conduiting those over to, or we will at the Advocate conduiting that over to folks over at the district, so we can ask questions later if need be. I'm going to move to this other question that really has to do with a child on an IEP, an individual educational plan. Question is, what is CSD, Corvallis School District, doing to attract professionals needed by the special ed program? Apparently, there's been a staff shortage, and this particular parent's child hasn't had speech services in over 6 months. The question is, what's being done to get professionals in the door so that these students are getting services? They specifically mention SLPs, OTs, and PTs. I don't know what those stand for. If Ryan, could you help with that?
Sure. So that's a speech and language pathologist, an occupational therapist, and a physical therapist. So
Great.
those are services that are sometimes written into a student's individual education plan. We have had challenges in recruiting and retaining some of those folks in those specialized positions. At this point in time, we are working to, we have brought on an OT and we have brought on SLPs to work to make up the time when we've had challenges in hiring. So I would encourage in that case, if there's questions around an SLP and services, that they reach out to their either to their front office or to the special education teacher that they work with to make sure that those services are happening, because we have been able to work towards providing those services and we're working to get caught up.
Right, but it is the case that there are students that have been left without services for a period of time while you're trying to staff up. Is that the case?
Yeah, for a period of time.
Okay, and so does 6 months sound about like the period of time that there's been some backlog in some instances, depending on that particular student's needs?
I can't answer that specifically, but I do know that there have been times this year that we've had challenges in providing services.
And then the other part of that questioner's question is, so what is the district doing to attract new personnel in?
Yeah, so we are continuing to be visible at job fairs to try our best to make Corvallis a great place to be as a school district, as a community. I know we are. We have found that we've had folks that have been coming to work from NCSD from other districts around us. So how do we make sure that people are willing to make that drive when the housing prices are unaffordable? So we're looking at all those pieces and factors. We've been able to bring on our own physical therapist, which has been great to have. We've had a strong occupational therapist who moved away, and so when those things happen, there's challenges in filling those positions. And I would say that is not unique for us. It's not unique in Oregon or across the country. Many times it's our education service districts, which are regional providers, that are finding that they're having that recruiting challenge as well.
To viewers out there, I want to say we're basically out of time, and yet I want to honor that there are so many questions here that could not get answered this evening, but we've been here for an hour, 20 minutes almost. I'm going to give you and Shauna about 60 seconds each. And then Ryan, I'm going to ask, I would like all of you to hang past the all clear from Sam this evening. So I want to talk with you all afterwards for a moment. Sure. I just really, Christa's already been asked this, but for this last year, what do you see as challenges met, challenges that have not been met, accomplishments? And for the next year, what do you see as challenges and opportunities? And then Shauna, I'll start with you.
Okay. So one of the things I'll say in terms of challenges met is one of the most meaningful things that I've been able to do as a school board member is to spend time and space with students and to see what's going really well in this district, going to graduations, going to plays, going to sporting events, going to community events that are student led, and seeing the tremendous skills that are developing in these students who are coming through our district from the Yay grants that the foundation is supporting. There is amazing leadership coming through with students, to see them in their relationships with the staff and the educators who are supporting them, that are so meaningful and deep, gives me hope in everything that we're doing in Corvallis and beyond. There are amazing things happening. And in terms of the challenges for next year, making sure that that's extended to all students and not just some of the students who we're really seeing thrive and come to the forefront in those settings. There are new, as you heard, new curricula that have been adopted in math, in social studies, and other, and really looking at making sure that students aren't falling through the cracks as that adoption takes place, as educators get used to and get the support they need for those new curricula and have that support. Educator well-being is one that I'm particularly worried about. I think we're on the edge of a workforce crisis in general, nationally, in education, and something that we have an opportunity to really stand hand in hand with educators and staff to meet effectively. And just one more big area I'll name that I know we're working on as a school board with the district leadership and with others is improved and enhanced communication. We have an amazing community that we live in and support. And the better that we can work together to address all of these challenges that are coming up and model for the students we're supporting how to do that in a way that honors each other, that's collaborative, that really brings all voices to the table, is something that we're trying to do better and better, and know that we have a lot of work to do still. But I'm looking forward to what will come from that in the year ahead.
Thank you so much. And Ryan, same question for you.
So I think that the work ahead of us continues to be helping to support our students as we move further from the pandemic, but we know that we have work to do. And we've talked about that quite a bit tonight. So I would say that that is the work ahead of us. In terms of some successes, I get the opportunity to see successes every day when I'm out in schools and I'm talking to kids or I'm at events. On Friday night is a great example of that. I was at the graduation for our students in our dual language program who've been in our DLI schools, who are now graduating, knowing multiple languages, being bicultural, biliterate. And one of the things that I saw was a few years ago, there were 14 kids up there earning those seals. This year, the stage was full of kids. So our programs continue to grow and flourish. We just have work to do to continue to enhance those things. I'm not going to say that we don't have work to do, because we all know that we have work to do. The questions allude to that, and I see that firsthand, and I hear that firsthand. And at the same time, our kids are resilient, and we have an amazing community that supports the work. So we're going to get there. It's just going to take us time, but I'm still optimistic about where we're headed.
And Ryan Noss, Corvallis Public School Superintendent, and Shauna Tominey, Corvallis School Board Vice Chair, and Executive Director of the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation, Angela Hibbard. Thank you. Also, a big thank you for our Corvallis Advocate staff and all the work they do behind the scenes. Honestly, what we do night of is only the tip of an iceberg that is far larger in terms of workload at the Advocate to get these done. Thank you to all Advocate staff. If you'd like to see the CitySpeak again, it will be available on our site. If not tonight, certainly by tomorrow. Past CitySpeaks are also there. Thanks again to Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op for making these possible financially. And of course, our subscribers and donors. Panelists, please stay with us past the all clear. This CitySpeak is adjourned. Good night.